Hello, everyone. Today I want to introduce you to two rather atmospheric horror stories with a nautical theme. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. Happy watching and listening. I have always been fascinated by lighthouses, and as I grew older, I made it my hobby to visit as many of them as possible all over the world. I'm something of a recluse, so the idea of being a lighthouse keeper a couple of hundred years ago has always appealed to me. I imagined climbing up to my perch, lighting the way for hundreds, maybe thousands, of ships, all while being completely alone. Just the thought of it excites me beyond measure. I was simply born in the wrong era, since most lighthouses today are automated. For someone like me, that's a true tragedy. However, as I studied different lighthouses throughout my life, I also discovered another side of the profession, one I don't think I could have fully appreciated otherwise. Countless lighthouse keepers over the past few centuries left behind astonishing accounts of events they either witnessed firsthand or heard about from colleagues. Events ranging from common unexplained phenomena to things that were downright terrifying. Over time, I collected the following stories from members of ALS, the International Lighthouse Society. Many of them were taken from old journal entries or written testimonies of lighthouse keepers who worked at manned stations across the world. Don't worry, I took the time to translate many of them into English with the help of other international members of the society, and we formatted some of them into a more reader-friendly form. To protect the lighthouses themselves from possible vandalism or damage, I won't be revealing their real names or exact locations. However, I will mention the countries, states, cities, and towns where these events took place. So, let's begin. South Carolina, United States. I started my shift, like most nights, at exactly 11 p.m. I could see Connor waiting on the shore near the lighthouse. The light fog hanging over the water was a bit thicker than usual, but I'll tell you, it wasn't nearly enough to raise suspicion. I hopped into my creaky little rowboat and began my trip toward the island where the lighthouse stood. For some strange reason, something made the water feel thicker. I don't know if that makes sense, but it felt harder to row through than usual. At first, I thought I was just getting weaker. Maybe old age was finally catching up with me. But the overall sensation was that the water itself was resisting me. It was strange. I reached the shore by the lighthouse, and Connor climbed up the spiral staircase with me so we could discuss what needed to be done that night. He had already trimmed the wicks, but the lens needed extra cleaning. The light had dimmed slightly. Not enough to put a ship in danger, you understand, but if I didn't clean it now, it would only get worse. And then I'd really have a problem. Along with a couple of bodies floating in the water. Nobody wants that. There wasn't much traffic through our waters, but the ships that did pass were large, carrying large crews to match, usually fishing or shrimp boats. Still, we didn't often have to guide anyone at all. It was just a quiet lighthouse by a restless, but otherwise calm sea. The windows looked like they could use a thorough cleaning as well, so I made a note to take care of those too. I walked Connor back down to his boat, and during our idle chatter he mentioned that he thought he'd seen someone standing near the shoreline by his boat. Graham. I swear, it looked like Susan, he said. I'll admit, hearing her name upset me a little, but I let him finish. He said he called out to her, but she just stood there. He quickly checked the fuel wicks, then ran back down the stairs and opened the lower door to step outside. When he did, he saw his boat sitting on the shore, but whoever had been standing there was gone. Connor, that's impossible, I said. Susan's been gone for over 6 years. I tried my best to keep a calm smile on my face, but I'll tell you this, hearing her name always chipped away at my sanity. I know, Graham, I know, he said. But I swear, it looked just like her. Even if it wasn't. I just want to know how she, or anyone, could have gotten onto the shore without a boat. And where the hell she went afterward. That's enough, Con, I said. It wasn't her. It was no one. You've got the same fog in your head that's hanging over the water tonight. Go home and get some rest. I need to head back up. Connor placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I really am. I know it's a sore subject. I miss her too. Just, keep your ears open tonight, alright? Even if it wasn't what I thought, it still could have been something. Being out here alone all night still isn't safe. So lock that damn door when you go back inside. I nodded and waved Connor toward his rowboat. See you tomorrow night, Con. He waved back as he climbed into the boat and began rowing into the fog toward the shore. The fog was so thick now that he simply vanished into it. All I could see was the small yellow glow of his lantern, drifting toward land like a firefly. Eventually, the firefly disappeared too, and I was alone. I returned to the lighthouse and, at Connor's request, bolted the damned door shut behind me. I swear, he's a good friend, but his imagination has always had a habit of running wild. That's probably why I work the night shift, because people like Connor and Jim, who work mornings, would lose their minds up here in the darkness and isolation. I climbed the long spiral staircase to the very top and began my usual checks, occasionally glancing out over the open water to catch my breath and let my mind wander. That night, it wandered to Susan. I couldn't stop thinking about her on any given day, but that night, after what Connor had said, I couldn't stop thinking about my love. Susan was murdered during one of my shifts. Some vile man, or woman, took her from me. I never learned who did it or why, though I had my suspicions. The police told me that when they arrived at my house to investigate complaints from neighbors about screams they'd heard, all they found was Susan lying face down on the bed. Her usually white nightgown was soaked crimson where the knife had entered her back. The idea that she could be here tonight was absurd. She had been dead for over 6 years. I know that because I remember watching her coffin being lowered into the cold, wet, lonely ground. I was the first to throw a handful of dirt onto my love and leave her to be covered by the rest. I left her completely alone. I've always felt guilty about that. People in town whispered, rumors spread that some man had been flirting with Susan while I was on duty at the lighthouse. But I knew her. I knew she would never have cheated on me. More likely, she fought back against someone who wanted her so badly that they were willing to take her life if they couldn't have her. At least, that's my theory. I'm certain now that I'll never know the truth. I cast one more glance at the water, then went to prepare the solution to wash the lighthouse lens. I crossed the octagonal room toward the bucket on the far side. And as I bent down to grab it, I heard a loud cracking sound outside, near the shore. I straightened up to look, and when I did, I noticed something in the fog. I saw the firefly again. Or rather, the dim glow of a lantern from a rowboat, darting wildly over the surface of the water. At first, I thought Connor must have come back for something he'd forgotten. But as I let go of the bucket to get a better look, I realized it couldn't possibly be Connor, or anyone else. The light was moving far too fast, almost skipping across the water through the thick fog. Curiosity got the better of me. After double-checking the light, fuel, wick, everything, I hurried down the stairs to the bolted door, unlocked it, and stepped out onto the rocky sand. I squinted into the fog, hoping to spot the dancing light again so I could observe it more closely. I did see it, but it wasn't moving anymore. It simply hung there, suspended in the fog, swaying gently in place. Even though I worked in a structure meant to produce light, it was always unnaturally dark at the base of the lighthouse. Because of that, we kept several lanterns lit and ready for use both inside and outside. I reached for one hanging from a post by the door and grabbed it, planning to move closer to the shoreline to see where the light was coming from. But before I'd taken more than a few steps, I noticed something else in the fog over the water. I saw the vague silhouette of something that looked like a person, standing above the surface. I quickly rubbed my eyes and raised the lantern in front of me, checking whether my imagination was playing a cruel trick. It was dark. The fog was thicker than before. "Who's there?" I shouted, running toward the shoreline. "Who's there? I swear, I froze. As I moved closer, the figure stepped further into my line of sight. It looked like Connor. He stood there in the fog, but I couldn't see his face, only the outline of his clothes. But I knew it was him. I knew his build. "Connor, what in God's name are you doing?" I yelled. He didn't move. And I still couldn't see his face. "Connor, get out of there." I let out an irritated breath, then noticed something out of the corner of my eye. There, on the shore, lay Connor's rowboat, splintered nearly in half, bouncing in the shallow waves. After a few moments of stunned silence, I turned back toward where I thought Connor stood. But before I could focus on him, a lantern flew out of the fog past my head and smashed into the lighthouse wall. There was no time to investigate. I spun around and ran back toward my shelter. All I could think about was how strong the bolt on that damn door really was. As I sprinted toward it, I heard a deep, roaring wail behind me. It sounded like a banshee screaming directly at me. I didn't turn around. I burst through the doorway, slammed it shut as fast as I could, then tore up the spiral staircase and locked the next door into the octagonal room. Against all reason, I ran to the window facing the back of the lighthouse, overlooking the fog-covered bay. I couldn't see anything. In my panic, I hadn't noticed the whale had moved. It was no longer out in the bay. It was closer, right at the base of the lighthouse. Listening carefully, I realized the cries were definitely approaching. But now they sounded as if whatever was making them was slowly walking around the base of the tower, circling it. I jumped and ran to the window on the other side of the room, facing the open sea. I threw it open and stepped onto the iron platform, looking down to see what was causing all of this. From that height, my stone fortress, I felt safe. It was a lie. I looked down through the iron grate beneath my feet, and there, standing on the shore before the sea, I saw Susan. I froze. I couldn't move. Was it really her? Was it truly my love? She looked small from where I stood so high above, but I recognized the beautiful chestnut hair, the soft porcelain white skin. As I stared, I barely managed to force the words from my throat. "Susan. Susan, is that you?" My voice echoed across the moonlit water. Then silence. Absolute silence. I couldn't hear the flame burning in the lighthouse wick. I couldn't hear the iron groaning beneath my feet. I couldn't hear the waves. It was deathly quiet. Until Susan slowly raised her head to look at me. In that moment, I knew it was not Susan. The green eyes I had known 6 years ago were gone, replaced by empty, pitch-black eyes, like a deer's. The ruby-red lips burned into my memory were replaced by a grotesquely wide mouth, stretched from ear to ear. I will never forget the expression on that thing's face. I covered my mouth with my hands, desperately trying to hear anything. The silence was deafening. All I could see were those black eyes, staring straight at me. I began backing toward the open window, and as I did, the creature let out a loud, broken, howling scream. It was a torturous sound. I clamped my hands over my ears and staggered backward toward the window, trying to find my way back inside. That's when I saw its figure moving quickly along the side of the lighthouse. It knew exactly where I was. It knew I was alone. And it was heading for the lower door, the very one I had forgotten to bolt shut in my panic. When I turned toward the door inside the room, planning to rush downstairs and lock it, the wick of the main lantern went out. "Damn it!" I shouted. I should have replaced the wick. I was plunged into total darkness, with only the moonlight to guide me. I fumbled for a lantern I could use and, as I stumbled, I heard the handle on the lower door begin to rattle. The echo raced up the tall spiral staircase and straight into the room where I stood, blinded, searching for an escape. I knew there was no time. I had to feel my way out. As I reached the wall and ran my fingers along the crack of the door, the howling grew louder and more intense. It was the sound of pure agony, and it did not stop. Dear God, it simply did not stop. I flung the door open as fast as I could and began racing down the stairs. There was no light on the staircase, but I knew every step by heart. I had to move fast. There was no time to worry about falling to my death. In truth, I might have preferred that fate to the alternative waiting beyond the lower door. When I reached the final few steps, I stopped in terror. The door was already ajar. All I could see was pale moonlight, drifting fog, and the dark shape of something slowly moving in front of the doorway, peering inside. The howling stopped. The creature was definitely there, watching me through the cracked door. I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed. I was terrified. In the silence, as it watched me from the darkness, it made no sound at all. All I could see was its outline, its shadow filling the doorway. It no longer moved. It simply watched. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, I began to make out the shape of its face. Oh God! I wish I had closed my eyes. It still looked like my Susan, but it was not my Susan. It had her hair. Her silhouette. The white dress I had buried her in. But the eyes, oh God, the eyes. Where her mouth should have been was a gaping black hole, stretched from ear to ear. I couldn't look away. No matter how desperately I wanted to. After a brief moment, one that felt like an eternity, I could swear I saw its mouth begin to curl into something like a smile, just before it closed the door. I didn't understand what had just happened. I still couldn't move. What was that thing? Why was it watching me? Why was it trying to look like my Susan? Susan! I cried, before I even realized I'd opened my mouth. I heard nothing. Once again, the silence was unnatural. Curiosity overcame fear. I ran to the door and opened it. I was terrified beyond words, but in that moment, I felt brave. I can't explain why. I stepped out onto the shoreline of the bay. There was no one there. The thick fog lay heavy over the water, and Connor's shattered rowboat still rocked silently in the shallow waves. I must have stood on that shore for hours, unmoving. I barely noticed when Jim emerged from the fog in his rowboat and called out to me. Graham! Hey, Graham! What the hell are you doing down there? Why isn't the light on? I snapped back to my senses as fast as I could. Jim! Hey, Jim! I'm so sorry. I think I need to go home. I'm not feeling well. Of course you're not feeling well, he said. You could have killed someone leaving the light out, especially in this damn fog. Christ, Graham, just go home. I'll go up there and take care of everything myself. Go get some sleep. I watched as Jim entered the lower doorway and shut the door behind him. Moments later, the light once again swept across the ocean. He was right. I could have cost people their lives by failing to do my job. I was lucky no ships had passed that night. But after what I'd been through, I needed sleep, or I needed to drink myself into oblivion. I didn't want to think anymore. Somehow, Jim didn't notice Connor's broken rowboat on the shore. I suppose he was too focused on the light to see it. I hadn't returned to work for several weeks when the police appeared at my door. Mr. Buford? Graham Buford? Please open the door. I had become a true hermit. I didn't want to leave the house. The morning I returned home, I told my employer I needed time. He said he'd find someone to cover the night shift. He was a good man, and he knew that if I needed time, there was a reason. He didn't ask questions. Mr. Buford, are you home? Please open the door, sir. I need to show you something. I hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. I'd been sitting in bed, drinking day after day just to sleep. I kept thinking about that night. About Susan. I was unbearably sad, but I kept trying to understand what it all meant. "I'm coming," I said. "Sorry." I stumbled to the door and opened it. "Yes, what is it, Ben?" "Mr. Buford, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need you to come with me. I need to show you something. Please get dressed and follow me." I nodded and didn't ask questions. I knew Ben well. He was the one who found Susan that night. He wouldn't have come over for nothing. The next part is difficult for me to recount, so please bear with me. Ben drove me about 8 kilometers down the coast from the lighthouse. That was where, beneath a rocky cliff, someone had found a body washed ashore. Ben knew who it was, and he brought me there to see if I knew anything. It was Connor. His body had been there for some time and wasn't immediately recognizable, but I knew it was him from a distance, long before I got close enough to smell the rot. Ben told me to cover my nose before turning the body over. Connor's face was green and sunken. His jaw hung open. His eyes looked like black holes, just like his gaping mouth. "We found this in his pocket, Graham," Ben said. "I want you to take a look." "I'm sorry, but I think you need to see it." "All right." He handed me a folded photograph. When I opened it, everything suddenly made sense. It was a photograph of my dear, sweet Susan. Second story, The Three Keepers. More than 100 years ago, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished off the coast of Scotland. Their final days were a living nightmare. On the day after Christmas in 1900, the crew of a passing ship came upon an abandoned lighthouse. There was no sign of the 3 keepers who were meant to be there: James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. The relief keeper, Joseph Moore, went ashore and discovered a disturbing scene. All doors, windows, and gates on the grounds were closed, but the rooms looked lived in. The beds were unmade. The clocks had stopped. Food still sat on the table, as if the keepers had fled in a hurry, or been taken. The building itself was badly damaged. Walls were scarred. Stones were cracked. Something had assaulted the lighthouse. Yet there were no reports of storms powerful enough to cause such destruction near the Flannan Isles off Scotland's northwestern coast. Still, the Atlantic in winter is treacherous, and some anomalous weather event may have been responsible. The prevailing theory suggests the 3 men were working near the shore when a sudden, massive wave rose from the sea and swept them away. That is almost true. But there is far more to this story. My name is Lucas Vant. I am an amateur reporter, a professional conspiracy theorist, and the owner of the blog Horrors in History. I am republishing the contents of a journal recovered by my team to share the true story behind one of the world's strangest mysteries. Through my contacts, I gained access to the logbooks of Thomas Marshall, one of the missing keepers. You may have seen excerpts from these journals circulating online over the past few years. However, I believe this is the first time the complete collection has been published, detailing the events that led to their disappearance. This is a tale of 3 men in isolation, of a terrible storm, of a hungry sea, and of a ship with no earthly explanation. Flannan Isles Light Station Log. Recorded by Thomas Marshall, temporary lighthouse keeper. Tuesday, December 11, 1900 AD. Mr. MacArthur had another outburst today, this time at breakfast. Apparently, Mr. Duckett overcooked the eggs and burned some of the bacon. In response, Mr. MacArthur smashed his plate and hurled a chair into the wall. I ran downstairs upon hearing the noise and found Mr. MacArthur seething with rage while Mr. Duckett simply stared at the remains of the eggs. Both men have been behaving strangely over the past week, prompting me to begin this second, unofficial journal. I prefer to have a written account of events, should an inquiry be conducted. Neither man is a bad person. I believe months of isolation have taken a toll on all of us. My goal now is simply to keep us alive and sane until relief arrives in 9 days' time, a task easier said than done. Mr. MacArthur is a large, bull-like man, broad-shouldered, with scarred knuckles. He has a reputation as a fierce brawler, though until last week he had been relatively calm. Mr. Ducat is his complete opposite, frail and elderly, nearly fully gray. If they come to blows over some trivial grievance, I am not confident I could restrain Mr. MacArthur. Let us hope it does not come to that. To calm everyone, I have decided to reduce our workload for today. There are still supplies at the jetty that need to be carried up, but that can wait until morning. Instead, I believe it would benefit us all to focus on the spirit of the season. Perhaps a few Christmas songs will cool Mr. MacArthur's temper and lift Mr. Ducat's spirits. I will assign them light tasks, decorating and planning games or amusements. My own task will be to prepare a large meal from whatever ingredients I can gather. It should remind the men of home, of happier times and family. I know my thoughts often turn to you, Rebecca. I suppose no one is truly immune to homesickness. There is one song I may share with the men tonight. I heard it in Glasgow last year, played by a young man on the street. I heard it only once, but I remember the words well. They make me think of you, Becca. I love a lassie, a bonny, bonny lassie. She's as pure as the lily in the dell. She's as sweet as the heather. The purple, purple heather. Mary, my Scottish bluebell. It seems a storm is gathering in the west. The sunrise was blood red, and the wind carries something unkind in it, not quite a smell, not quite a sharpness. The seagulls are circling and calling to one another in agitation. Truth be told, they remind me a little of Mr. MacArthur. It is unkind of me to write that. And yet, I can hear the man even now. He stomps about above me, pacing back and forth while standing watch at the lantern. We have not seen a ship for several days, but we will not break our routine so long as I am the senior keeper. I hear the wind already rattling the windows, air rushing in from the Atlantic before roaring upward along the cliffs. Here on the island, in our small stone tower, surrounded by all the splendor and terror of the sea. Ah, Becky, what a beautiful reminder that God is omnipresent, and terrifying in his love. I will assign the men their duties and then head down to the jetty to bring up additional supplies, in case this storm arrives tonight. We already have plenty, but the Atlantic's weather is as unpredictable as it is primordial. If we are stranded for several days, it would not do to find ourselves short on bread, whiskey, or paraffin for the lamp. God help us, a lack of any one of those would send Mr. MacArthur into a fury, while Mr. Ducat would likely stand in a corner and count the cobwebs. Farewell, Becky. I promise I will be home by Christmas, and I will be laden with gifts for you and the children. Farewell. Mr. Ducat spotted the ship shortly after sunset. It appears to be motionless, perhaps anchored half a league offshore. The storm I feared this morning is approaching, and visibility is poor. Even so, I can make out the vessel in the darkness whenever our beam passes over that stretch of sea. It may be some trick of water and sky, but the ship seems to possess an inner glow. Its planks and sails carry a pale, bluish sheen, faint, yet intensifying whenever struck by the lighthouse beam. Strange. The wind has strengthened, and I can hear the rain beginning. I believe our festive dinner went well, and the men very much enjoyed the song I mentioned. For a few blessed hours, the tension that had been creeping through our lighthouse receded. However, with the appearance of this ship, I sense that Mr. MacArthur has grown agitated once more, and Mr. Ducat has begun whispering to himself when he thinks no one is listening. 9 days more. The relief vessel arrives on the 20th. I do not expect we will accomplish much tomorrow, so I will try to occupy our minds with some game or competition while we wait out the storm. My watch approaches, and I find myself eager to look upon the ship again. We attempted to signal it with our light, but to no effect. Sleep well, Becky, and perhaps remember us in your prayers, if you find the time. Flannan Isles Light Station Log. Recorded by Thomas Marshall, temporary lighthouse keeper. Wednesday, December 12, 1900 AD. Do you believe in ghosts, Becky? Of the two of us, I always thought you the more fanciful, possessed of a lively imagination, compared to my dour pragmatism. And yet, after last night, I find myself wondering if ghosts are real after all. The storm struck us with full force sometime after midnight. It still howls now. Such ferocious winds I have not witnessed in all my 2 decades of service as a keeper. Rain lashes the building, threatening the windows, and the temperature is falling rapidly. If this continues, I believe we shall see snow by midday. When I relieved Mr. MacArthur from his post this morning, I found him wrapped in 2 sweaters, a scarf, and his greatcoat. It is bitterly cold in the lantern room. The glass lets the chill pour in. Yet the view was astonishing. The sea raged around us. Dark clouds mirrored the waves below, churning and boiling. Waves higher than our home smashed against the rocks like a madman pounding on a door. It felt as though the rain might drown the entire world and wash away anyone who had forgotten to build an ark. The Flannan Isles Light Station is modern and secure. Our walls are strong. The tower is tall. We even have a rail system for transporting supplies and equipment from shore. And yet, standing in the lantern room this morning, Rebecca, I felt a deep and terrible fear. What protection can our human constructions offer against such a violent expression of nature? I confess it shook me, though I did not show it. Mr. MacArthur, on the other hand, was clearly overwhelmed by the storm. He did not hear me open the hatch leading from the engine room to the lantern chamber. I believe, though I cannot be certain, that he was crying. He was quiet, but something in the rhythm of his breathing resembled a muffled sob. I cleared my throat to announce my presence. Mr. MacArthur turned to me, wiping his eyes. His face was wet. "I was just thinking about the bridge," he said, by way of explanation. "In weather like this?" I asked. "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" There was more heat in his voice than there was in the room, so I dropped the matter. I took my position at the lantern and instructed Mr. MacArthur to prepare lunch. "Don't stare at the ship too long," MacArthur called as he descended the ladder into the watch room. "There is something wrong with him, Mr. Marshall." I shuddered, likely from the cold, and thanked him for the advice. Once the hatch closed, I was able, for the first time since last night, to properly observe the vessel. My breath caught in my throat. The ship was closer. It still appeared anchored, rocking atop the whitecaps, but it was unmistakably several hundred yards nearer the shore than before. Any details of its construction were blurred by rain, foam, and the first flurries of snow. And yet, I immediately understood what Mr. MacArthur meant. Watching the ship made my stomach knot. My eyes ached, and pressure built along an invisible line between them. The glow I observed last night was muted during the day, yet it revealed itself from time to time. It shifted between a washed-out green and a striking blue. I have heard stories of ships encountering brilliant patches of light in the deep ocean, luminescence trailing behind them in their wake. I was told it was beautiful. The light surrounding the ship anchored in this storm was not beautiful. I could not look at it for long. The vessel continued to ignore my intermittent attempts to signal it with our lighthouse. I stood the morning watch, though I feared I might freeze to death. As expected, the rain turned to snow well before noon, and the great glass windows encircling the lantern room began to ice over. In response, I greatly increased the flow of paraffin to the lamp and lit both stoves to warm the chamber. I have never seen weather like this, Becky. When the snowfall was at its heaviest, I saw lightning split the clouds apart. The flashes stitched the sky together like twisting purple-white veins. I have never seen lightning during a blizzard. The waves surged like barbarians threatening the shore. Mr. Duckett relieved me at the watch without saying a word. I was too shaken by the hours spent trying not to look at the ship. He himself seemed distracted. Mr. Duckett was dressed improperly for the weather, wearing only a sweater, no coat, no hat. I lent him my greatcoat and instructed him to keep the stoves well fed from the prepared stack of firewood. I am not sure he heard me. I am not sure I care. I tried to occupy myself during the afternoon by taking inventory of our supplies. We have a great quantity of materials stored below on the beach, in the supply sheds, but with the storm's fury, they might as well be in Russia. By my calculations, we have food for 6 days and twice as much fresh water. Fuel for the lantern will last a month, thank God. But kindling for the stoves, only 2 days. We will endure. A storm cannot last forever. There is something in the lighthouse with us. Or at least, that is how it feels, Becky. I sense a presence whenever I pass a room that ought to be empty, as though I have just missed a visitor standing in a corner, or hiding just out of sight. I have begun to feel as though I am being followed. The storm only worsened toward nightfall. The walls groan as though made of rotten wood rather than stone. Every window is iced over, every door frozen shut. I spent the latter half of the day moving from room to room, pretending not to feel the pursuit. Dinner passed in silence. I will take the night watch and pray that our conditions improve. I think of you and the girls always. Flannan Isles Light Station Log. Recorded by Thomas Marshall, temporary lighthouse keeper. Thursday, December 13, 1900 AD. I believe I am losing my mind, Becky. The storm continues unabated. Snowdrifts cover most of the first floor. Lightning flashes almost constantly, and now we hear thunder as well. I am ashamed to admit that we have begun neglecting our duties in the lantern room. Mr. Duckett shows every sign of fearing that chamber with its glass walls and its terrible view of the ship. Mr. MacArthur grows irritable whenever asked to stand watch. And I must confess, I myself have no desire to climb that ladder. I have divided the schedule into short shifts with intervals during which the lantern stands unattended. This violates regulation, but fog from the Atlantic has rolled in so thick that I doubt any vessel would dare approach the shore. Any wise captain would ride out the storm in open water. That is what we are trying to do here, Rebecca. Ride out the storm. 7 days remain until relief. The three of us spent most of the morning in the common room near the largest stove. Neither Mr. MacArthur nor Mr. Duckett appears to be shaving. MacArthur has begun muttering under his breath. Duckett prays. And I hum quietly whenever silence falls. I love a lassie, a bonny wee lassie. She's pure as the lily in the dell. She's sweet as the heather. I saw a ghost when passing the control room around midday. A sickly blue light spilled from beneath the door, reminding me of the ship upon the water. When I opened the door, the first sensation that struck me was the smell. Do you remember that whale that washed ashore that summer near Lagmati? Do you remember how it began to stink as it rotted in the sun? Its entrails spilling onto the sand, birds pecking at it beneath the July heat? I was there again. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing in the corner. He was not fully material, rather a shimmering light shaped like a human form. The phantom looked toward me and smiled. My first thought was that the ghost resembled my father, tall, well-dressed, well-groomed, almost smiling. Then the figure distorted. Its features rose and fell like a tide. One moment it resembled my father, the next my brother, then you. It lasted only a few breaths. Then the room was empty, but I remained, shaking. I closed the door and resolved to take an additional watch. I will add another entry after my shift. I miss you, Rebecca. I miss the girls. I miss our home, our hearth, your cooking. God help me, how I miss your cooking. I miss the sun. The wind continues. You will not be surprised, Becky, that I found the ghost ship closer to our shore when I took the watch. The vessel lay less than half a mile from the rocks, still rocking madly upon the high waves. How its anchor chain did not snap, I cannot say. Now I could see details, even through the snow and lightning. The sails were taut, full white canvas snapping in the wind. The timbers looked new, with a freshly carved figurehead in the shape of an angel with outstretched wings. There were figures on the deck, despite the storm. They did not appear alarmed. On the contrary, I believe they were dancing and singing. It sounds mad. I know. I know. But that is not all, Rebecca, because one moment the ship appeared more inviting and beautiful than a winter bearskin blanket, and the next its sails became ragged shreds, its timbers turned to rot, and the figures upon the deck were no longer singing. They were screaming. There will be no night watch. No mortal ship sails in such weather. Want again, second half of the diary. We will need to conduct further fact-checking and consult with our legal counsel before publication. I will attempt to expedite this, if only because the final fate of the keepers should be known, as a warning, if nothing else. Lucas Want, presenting the final portion of Thomas Marshall's diary. I will keep this introduction brief, as the following entries may take time to process. A small warning: what follows contains disturbing material and is, frankly, unsuitable for anyone. Please remove all small children, pets, and those of fragile disposition from the room before continuing. Flannan Isles Light Station Log. Recorded by Thomas Marshall, temporary lighthouse keeper. Friday, December 14, 1900 AD. Beneath the ship is a shadow, a vast beast, radiating hunger, so immense that the vessel appears like a scab upon a corpse. I saw this shadow in the water. I am certain of it. It revealed itself in a flash of lightning, so massive it could rival the island itself. At its very edge hovered the ship, once more beautiful and welcoming, creeping ever closer to shore. Then the lightning faded, and the shadow vanished. I waited and watched as the sun rose, but I did not see the creature again beneath the surface. Becky, I fear we will not last another 6 days. The storm roars and shrieks. Waves batter the rocks. If they rise any higher, I fear we will be washed away. The men and I spent the night in the common room, attempting to play cards. Mr. MacArthur grew enraged with every lost hand. Mr. Duckett continued placing his cards face down. So mostly we sat by the stove and listened to the wind. I hear voices in that air. Your voice. The girls' voices. Even the voice of our little boy, whom we lost 3 winters ago. Sometimes the voices are soft and singing. I love a lassie, a bonny wee lassie. And then the wind shifts, and you begin to shriek, begging for death. From the expressions crossing Mr. MacArthur's and Mr. Duckett's faces, I can tell they hear something in that howl as well. It was a terrible night. There will be no watches today. No one should sit in that glass chamber and be forced to behold that ship. It is corrupt in its allure. I cannot decide whether I wish to flee from it, or swim toward it. This morning I encountered another phantom. It had no true form, only light, roughly my size and silhouette. Instead of sapphire, the glow was now crimson. The light emanated from the pantry. I felt an overwhelming urge to enter that space. It was pitch black, save for the glow. I stood in the doorway, staring at the apparition for nearly a minute. When it became clear that I would not move, the door slammed shut of its own accord. Mr. Duckett asked to speak with me sometime in the late morning or early afternoon, I cannot be sure, as all clocks have stopped. He pulled me into a corner of the common room. I sat by the stove while he paced. Mr. Duckett now manages to look both far younger and far older than his years. His hair has turned completely white, though only days ago it was merely gray. His beard, if one can be charitable enough to call it that, was strangely red and sparse. He hunched his narrow shoulders and turned watery blue eyes toward me. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "The wind?" He finally sat upon his bunk. "Is that all you hear?" It was not all. All day, Rebecca, I hear that song more and more often. It has grown hoarse, as though the words were being torn from the throats of a choir of the hanged. The air barely passed through his shredded vocal cords. But I could not tell all this to Mr. Duckett, Becky. He would have thought I was losing my mind. So I asked him what he meant. "I hear his voice whispering," Duckett said. "He says he is God." but he lies. Mr. Duckett stood up, breathing heavily and unevenly. I want to go home, Mr. Marshall. Lately I have been seeing my sister here at the lighthouse. She died when I was 11. Please, may I leave? I tried to smile. The relief vessel will be here in a few days, sir. Just hold on until then. This storm makes us see things, hear things, phantoms that aren't real. I squeezed Mr. Duckett's shoulder. It felt very thin beneath his shirt. Hold on. I have always admired you, Mr. Marshall, he replied after a long silence. Forgive me if I ever disappointed you, or Elizabeth. No, you were. Who is that? Elizabeth. Mr. Duckett was already drifting toward the stairs. He muttered something about taking a shift at the lantern. I let him go. The wind rose again, rattling the frozen windows, howling that strangled song. I love a lassie, a bonny wee lassie. It suddenly occurred to me that I had not seen Mr. MacArthur for some time. I went from room to room, calling his name. There was no sign of him until I reached the first floor. The front door stood open. Snow had blown inside, covering the boards. I thought I glimpsed a figure retreating into the fog. I stepped toward the door, then stopped. MacArthur's clothes lay piled at the threshold. Stop! I shouted, rushing after him. Have you lost your mind, Mr. MacArthur? You'll freeze. It was him. I recognized the beard, the wild hair, the broad shoulders. He moved quickly, and I kept losing sight of him as I stumbled through snow and fog. The man was naked as the day he was born, Becky. And I swear, he was laughing like a madman. He quickly outpaced me, and I had no choice but to return to the lighthouse before I lost my bearings, something that should not have been possible, even in a storm. But the lighthouse was dark. I found Mr. Duckett upstairs in the lantern room. He was sitting beside the extinguished lamp. He had shut off both the light and the pilot. The glass around us trembled as I approached him. Outside in the snow was a red haze, that bleeding glow. It was already late evening, yet aside from that flicker, the world beyond was ink-black. Lightning tore through the clouds, red lightning. In one flash, I saw the ship and the shadow beneath it, and an entire field of waterspouts connecting sea and sky. The ship was closer to shore. Of course it was closer. And now it was red. Everything was red. 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 I'm sorry, Mr. Marshall, Duckett whispered. I had to turn off the light. He is searching for us. If it's dark, he may not see us. Who, Mr. Duckett? The ship. It is his light, his lantern. Our lighthouse warns ships away from the rocks, but his is an invitation, Mr. Marshall. Duckett giggled eagerly. Have you ever heard of the anglerfish? I don't understand, sir. Duckett, Mr. Duckett, it was useless. The man was nearly catatonic, Becky. He did not even flinch at the thunder. The sound came from the west, a colossal screech of bending iron, cutting through the wind. The ground shook as though a star had struck it. When lightning flashed again, I saw the sea explode into a terrible maelstrom. Dozens of waterspouts rose from the Atlantic like enchanted serpents. Flannan Isles Light Station Log. Recorded by Thomas Marshall, temporary lighthouse keeper. Saturday, December 15, 1900 AD. I was thinking of you, Becky, before I lost consciousness. Of you and the girls. I thought I heard you calling to me, from the shore, or perhaps from the ship. The storm has passed, thank God, and blessed be his name. The storm has passed. The sky is clear, calm and blue as eternity. I awoke alone in the lantern room. The lighthouse was cold and dark. Mr. Duckett was nowhere to be found. Judging by the position of the sun, pure and beautiful, it was nearly evening. I do not know what caused me to lose consciousness or sleep so long, Becky. But I awoke refreshed and full of strength. Before, I was tired and confused. Now I am well. The wind has fallen silent, but the breeze remembers and carries that song. I love a lassie, a bonny wee lassie. The ship is now almost at the shore. I see now that it is only a boat, faintly glowing. The timbers are red. The sails are red. The stain is red. It is everywhere. There is a shadow beneath the ship, but perhaps that is merely my imagination playing tricks on me. It does not matter. Today is a beautiful day. The air is cold and sweet with salt. I see Mr. MacArthur and Mr. Ducat on the shore. They are walking toward the ship. And what a magnificent vessel it is. Nearly 100 feet long and no less than 60 wide. The dancers on the deck are waving to me, Becky. I believe the ship will take me home. And then you and the girls can join me, and everything will be well. What joy! What joy! This is Lucas Want. These are the final entries of Thomas Marshall's journals. December 15th was the last entry. Later that same day, a steamer called Arctur passed the Flannan Isles lighthouse and noted that its light was not burning. The ship's captain never reported the situation, as Arctur soon ran aground. The relief vessel scheduled to arrive on December 20th was delayed until the 26th. The crew expected to find 3 irritated keepers, upset at having missed Christmas with their families. Instead, they found an abandoned island. The beds were unmade. The clocks had stopped. Food still sat on the table, partially eaten. The western landing was damaged beyond repair. Rails were twisted, and the massive stone used as an unofficial lookout had fallen. No bodies were ever found. The lighthouse was eventually repaired and staffed with new keepers. The world moved on. But Mr. Marshall, Mr. MacArthur, and Mr. Ducat were not forgotten. Over the past century, there have been roughly a dozen reports of a ghost ship. It came to be known as the Phantom of the Seven Hunters, and it always appeared alongside a storm and a strange light. Witnesses swore the vessel bore an unusual figurehead. 3 naked male bodies, sewn together into a single chimera. One grinning. One laughing. And the third forever staring toward the horizon. As if searching for something. So, these were the stories, guys. Alright, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments, and now I'll say a few words from myself. Let's start with the first story. I'll also add a comment that I recorded immediately after finishing it, but first, in general, this story reminded me a lot of the game Static Dread, The Lighthouse, or something like that. I might be messing up the name. The vibe is very similar. The plot, too. Overall, the story itself is fine, but it feels a bit rushed and compressed. The ending is pleasant though. We get a small plot twist, where it turns out that his buddy, who also happened to be his coworker, was involved with his wife in some way. It's an open ending, and we're supposed to piece together what really happened ourselves. Now, here's the opinion I wrote right after reading the first story. So, writing this immediately after finishing the first story from this collection. What we have here is the following. First of all, the story feels rushed and very abrupt. Like, there are only a few words of setup, and then suddenly some creepy thing appears and starts terrifying everyone with its howl, its eyes, its smile, and so on. From what I understood, that siren, or banshee, or whatever it was probably some kind of sea spirit. And that's why it took the form of Susan. That would explain it. Also, when Connor rode away from the lighthouse, not that much time had passed. He shouldn't have been able to return so soon. So I think that this entity killed him, or drowned him, or did something to him, and then returned using that broken boat, or at least imitated his return, just to lure the main character outside. He goes out, sees Susan. Then later, wait, or was it when he had already escaped back into the lighthouse? Let me think. He runs back inside after hearing the howl, looks down from the lighthouse, and then sees Susan, with that unnatural smile. And he also sees Connor's broken boat, which he actually noticed before running back inside. So earlier in the story, we're told that Susan was murdered by someone who desired her while Graham, or Grim, however you pronounce it, was working at the lighthouse. And later we find out that the body they recovered was Connor's. And here's the key part: Connor had a photograph of Susan in his pocket, which strongly suggests that he desired her. That he was the one who killed her, and hid it from his friend. Just imagine that drama. That's actually pretty cool. The twist is very sudden and very compressed, but still cool. If my interpretation is correct, that is. And if it isn't, then honestly, I don't know what the author was trying to say. So basically, Connor paid for what he did. The sea entity, wearing the face of Susan, killed him for murdering her while she was alive. That's how it all comes together. And the idea that Connor was secretly obsessed with Graham's wife? Yeah, that part definitely falls into place. Alright. Now, about the second story. The second story I liked much, much more. Like, a lot more. It's really good. First of all, I love this kind of narrative structure. It's presented as logbook entries, technically a station log, but essentially diary notes. We also have a reporter framing the story, claiming to publish these records in some kind of article or blog. That's just really cool. So what do we have? 3 lighthouse keepers. One is the chief keeper, the main guy. Another is an old man. At first, I thought there would be some twist involving him, like, that he was actually young but aged rapidly from fear, because he's described as both young and old at the same time. That would have been interesting, even though that's not really how aging works. Then there's this whole thing with Elizabeth. I didn't really get that. Who is Elizabeth? Why is she mentioned? Is she the ship? Something else? It's very open-ended. Some characters aren't fully, and the author could have done more with that, but maybe they just didn't want to. The third guy is this aggressive, stupid, short-tempered brute. And then there's the main narrator, the observer type, always watching, always thinking. In the end, all 3 of them become part of the ghost ship, sewn together into that chimera. 3 naked men with different facial expressions. That's a really cool idea. I genuinely liked that. The story shows people slowly losing their sanity. Some of them already had issues to begin with, but the main character's descent into madness is gradual. It actually reminded me of one of my previous videos, the one about sheep walking in circles and a man going insane. Same idea here. At first, he notices strange behavior in his co-workers. Then the ship appears. Then the ship starts moving closer. Then it turns out the ship is basically like an anglerfish's lure, a light used to attract victims. And the ship itself seems to rest on the back of some massive creature, like a fin breaking the surface of the sea. This enormous monster that collects people. Or souls. Or something like that. The hallucinations are great too. Sometimes the ship looks alive, cheerful, full of dancing and singing people. Other times it turns into something rotten and horrifying. And finally, when all 3 completely lose their minds, they undress and walk toward the ship, seeing it as something beautiful and welcoming. How they didn't die from hypothermia is anyone's guess, especially MacArthur, who just stripped naked and wandered off first. But overall, I really liked this story. Some of the metaphors and expressions felt a bit strange or out of place, but I checked, they're pretty much the same in the original English, so that's just the author's style. If you liked this story too, and enjoyed the vibe, let me know in the comments what you liked and what you didn't. And if you didn't like it, say that too. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Take care, and see you in the next video.